Welcome to the FemiNinja Project. I am your host, Cheryl Ilove, middle-aged ninja hiding in plain sight, dedicated to restoring human dignity one person at a time and helping you unleash your personal power. Discover that it's possible to look like a woman, act like a lady, move like a ninja, and think like a warrior. And remember, men are always welcome on the FemiNinja Project. Hello and welcome to another episode of the FemiNinja Project, and thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I have a fantastic guest with me today, and he is a master communicator. His name is Peter George, and he is a professional speaker, public speaking coach, author, and host of the Public Speaking with Peter George podcast. His recently released book is titled The Captivating Public Speaker: How to Engage, Impact, and Inspire Your Audiences. And Peter, as I said, wasn't always a master communicator and had to overcome multiple obstacles to find his voice. And he is going to tell us how you can find yours. So Peter, thank you for being here and welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here, Cheryl.
You have a fascinating story.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm the improbable public speaker.
Are you really?
Yeah, if you ask me anything all the way through my 20s, early 20s, if anything I wouldn't be doing, it would be speaking in public.
Isn't it funny how life turns out? So how did you end up being the least likely person to become a public speaker to where you are now, not only a very well sought out public speaker, but a professional speaking coach as well? So how did that happen?
Well, when I grew up, I had both a lisp and a stutter. And I still do, although you probably won't hear them, but I do occasionally. And when you're growing up, I grew up in Providence, Rhode Island. And when you're growing up in the city and you're 9 years old and you have a lisp and a stutter, you learn to do two things fairly well. One is keep your mouth shut, so no one would make fun of it. And two is become fairly proficient in sports, because if you were good in sports, no one picked on you. So I learned to do those two things. And I also learned that if I didn't speak in school, if I only spoke to my friends and then outside of school, my family and friends, if I didn't speak in school, I was pretty much okay. I wouldn't answer questions, and all the teachers knew it. Don't call on me, I'm not going to answer, because I was afraid that I would stutter and be made fun of or whatever. And that really never happened to me. It was more in my head than anything else that people would do that. But with that said, I became very shy, very introverted, still kind of both of those things. And last thing in the world I ever wanted to do was communicate with people. By the time I got to high school, the lisp and the stutter were all on, but my tendency not to communicate to a lot of people was still there. And then that carried over when I got out of school and I went into the corporate world. That carried over into that. However, I found out in the corporate world, I had to talk to people. Well, only if I wanted the job. And so my company sent me for lessons. Well, actually, before that, I was listening to cassette tapes. Shows you how long ago this was. In the car, listening to them, reading books, whatever I could get on. There wasn't a ton back then. And the problem was, I was like, yeah, I'm getting better, but not fast enough. And I want to become very good at it. So then my company sent me for group lessons. And that was fantastic, but I wanted even more. And then I went for one-on-one lessons. And that's when it really turned and became a skill tool for me. I don't believe in public speaking or leadership or those things being soft skills, as people call them. I believe they're power skills. And that became a power skill for me. And then when I left the corporate world and went and opened my own companies, I found out the more I spoke in public, the more revenue we had. Because of the exposure. And I looked like the expert. And all those things added up to making my companies very strong. And so no matter what I had as a company, I made sure there was a speaking component involved in our marketing. And other than referrals, word of mouth, nothing was more powerful than that.
And that's interesting that you said, I never heard that it was considered a soft skill, because to
Yeah.
me, that is not only is it powerful, like you said, but it's so challenging. I've taken several, speaker boot camps and classes and stuff, and I thought it was really fun, but that's just me. But it's still, even though it was fun, you get that sense of, oh, do I really want to do this? As you're walking up the steps to the stage, it's like, where's the back door just in case?
Yeah, there's a lot of reluctance to it. And I understand why, both what's inside of us and what we're afraid of happening. Truthfully, I don't believe anybody is afraid of public speaking.
Really?
I don't believe anybody is. I think we use that terminology. We're more afraid of screwing up and embarrassing ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
No one's ever died of public speaking.
That's
And
true.
truthfully, no one's ever died of embarrassment, but that's what we're afraid
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think I've come pretty close a few times of dying of
of.
embarrassment, but
Well, that might be
again,
true.
yeah, that's just me.
But those become our best stories, don't they, later on in life?
Yeah, they really do. At the time, they're pretty painful, but then when you look back at it, it's like, oh my gosh, this is a great story that I can include in public speaking. So talk about the power of storytelling in your public speaking. I mean, do you incorporate that?
100%. And I believe everybody should. Storytelling is probably the most powerful thing you can do when you're presenting. And that doesn't make a difference if you're presenting from stage or presenting in a corporate boardroom. We learn by stories. But on the business side, we get caught up in, oh, this is business. We don't tell stories in business. Yeah, we should. People can't digest nuts and bolts,
Mm-hmm.
but we can. And a story is made up of a character or characters, and then conflict, the challenge they had and how they overcame that challenge. What better in business
Mm-hmm.
than to tell a story about, think about some of the things we resent. Let's say it's a sales team and you say, Susan here went out and did this and this and this and this, and it was fantastic and she's great and everybody should be just like her. Well, that doesn't help.
Mm-hmm.
But if the manager says Susan was having this problem, she got this help here, learned to do this, tried this out, it failed, tried this out, oh, that failed too, tried this out, oh, and that was the golden nugget.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the stories we learn from.
And
Storytelling's huge.
I think that everybody can relate to that. Nobody can relate to, or very few people could relate to, look at Susan, isn't she wonderful? Bravo, everybody should be like this. Well, that just, for me, I'd have that instant resentment. And it's like, why even bother trying? And, if Susan is the gold standard, I'm just either going to, sleep back here or go somewhere else.
Exactly. And, when we talked about embarrassment and conflict and all, no one's ever said to me, hey, Peter, tell me about your best time where everything went absolutely perfectly on stage. First of all, there wasn't one. Mm-hmm. Second of all, people don't want to hear that. I get asked all the time, however, what's the worst thing that's ever happened to you on stage? Mm-hmm. And then we're just going in degrees of how bad it was. Mm-hmm. And I tell them with laughter because now they're funny.
So at the time when those things happened to you when you were on stage, how did you deal with it? I mean, was it an oh crap moment, or did you just kind of like, ha, 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 and move on?
It depends on how bad it was. There was one where in the first 5 minutes, not even 5 minutes, first 30 seconds, I screwed up big time. I mean, it was bad in front of 750 people. There was not a response from them whatsoever. Oh. And I went over and took a drink of water and thought, I've got 50 minutes left. It can only get better from here. I think my first thought was, you got to be kidding me.
So was this early in your speaking career, or was
not even close?
That is something that is so reassuring to hear, I think, for a lot of people.
I tell my clients, I tell anybody who wants to listen, you can start with humor, but don't ever start with a joke, because what I think is a joke and you think is a joke, what's funny, might be two different things. Plus, if you're nervous or you're amped up, your timing's off a little bit. Mm-hmm. Well, I told this joke perfectly. The problem is it's a very sophomoric joke that my wife happened to be there, who later said, what caused you to do that? And at the last minute, I abandoned my opening and went with that. And that was a huge mistake. And to this day, I don't know why I did it. I obviously thought it was funny. It wasn't. It was bad, but now it's one of my favorite stories.
Well, there's nothing more, let's say, just paralyzing than thinking that you did something and delivered this amazing joke or story, and you see your spouse with, this look on her face, rolling her eyes, or maybe a look of shock.
She actually had her face in her hand
Oh
at the seat,
dear.
like kind of like I don't know him.
Who is this guy?
And
That's
she
pretty.
probably on the plane back, she probably asked me 3 or 4 times, what came to you? What went through your head at that moment? I'm like, I don't know. Funny thing is, I spoke there 3 more times.
Wow. So you were able to recover. So even though you made a major mistake, that it wasn't fatal.
It wasn't
And
fatal. They
typically,
never are.
yeah, I was just going to say that typically those types of mistakes never really are. At the moment, we think they are. But as you said, it just gives you more stories to tell. And yeah, I think that's another thing everybody can relate to. Nobody's perfect. And when we can make those mistakes, admit them, and laugh at ourselves, it makes us more human and more relatable.
If you can name it, I've done it. I've been doing this for 35 years. You do it enough, things all the way from the zipper being down to you name it. Now I always talk about doing rituals to get you where you need to be in
Mhm.
character and everything else, what energy you want to come out on stage or into the front of the room with. And I have certain rituals everywhere from listening to the same song about a half hour ahead of time to everything in between. And then the last thing I do now, which is probably about 9 times, is check my zipper.
That is great advice. And I'm even toying with using that phrase as the title for this episode. Check your zipper.
Yeah. I think
But
it's awesome advice.
it is awesome advice. And I've heard many times a lot of professional speakers have gone on stage with their zipper at, what do they call it, half mast or whatever.
Yep.
Yeah, I've never had any of those. I don't have the kind of speaking career that you do, but I have been on stage several times. And fortunately, they've always gone well. But my biggest faux pas in podcasting, I think, was showing up in my bathrobe for a podcast. And, I was the host, she was the guest. Thank goodness it wasn't going to be live. And I got the timing wrong, the time change. I'm here in Denver. She was in Frankfurt. I thought I had it perfectly timed. I was still in my bathrobe and look at the clock. I got 2 hours to get myself together. And I look at my messages. I'm here in the waiting room. And it was like, oh no, what do I do? So I thought I had 2 ways of dealing with this. I could either have said, oh, I'm so sorry, I made a mistake, we're going to have to reschedule, or suck it up and say, so I chose door number 2. And when we signed on, I said, I just have to warn you ahead of time, I'm in my bathrobe. And she bust out laughing. And I said, but I am wearing pants, because I did have sweatpants underneath my bathrobe. So yeah, this was early in the pandemic. So I think we were all learning back then.
Yeah, still are.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, if you're not learning, you're not trying.
Exactly.
So tell us, what I really would like to hear is how you gained that confidence. I mean, obviously through the classes, but if there's anything that you can share with the audience of, how to get the confidence to even get on stage in the first place, or to have that quote unquote difficult conversation with someone, because it's the same thing.
Yeah, it is. And there's a couple of things. One is, if not you, who? And this is all mind games, right? It really is. It's mindset. And your mind is playing games with you. Your mind is telling you how you're going to make a mistake. Your mind is telling you you're not the one worthy of doing this. You're not the expert, whatever. Truthfully, you don't have to be an expert. You're just sharing knowledge. But I'll give you a few ideas. One is, think of what we think about. What if I screw up? What if I forget what I'm going to say? What if they don't like me? Well, there's a common thread here. Me, I. Who can take that pressure? That's a ton of pressure. Take that weight off yourself. Take the focus off of yourself and put it on the audience where it belongs. You're there to enlighten or serve the audience. So anybody who's willing to serve other people, we don't say, well, she's going out to do nonprofit work and she's only halfway good at it.
Right.
Right? We say, isn't that great? Look what she does for the community. So think of it that way. You're there just to serve people. You're nothing but a tool. And this is what I tell my clients. We're tools when we get up and speak. That's it. We just convey messages that
Mhm,
resonate and those audiences want and need.
mhm,
So when you do that, it becomes more reasonable.
mhm.
The other thing is, it goes back, and this is the mindset, to what I learned as a kid. As much as I didn't want to communicate with people, it goes back to my great grandmother. My great grandmother lived to be just shy of 100. So she died when I was 18 years old. And she lived up
Wow.
in nowhere, Maine. Country girl, just go to Bangor and then just keep going out into the woods.
Wow.
And we'd have these family reunions every 5 years. And there would be 250 to 300 people there because up there's nothing to do but make more cousins. So so we'd have all these people. And at one point, my great grandmother would take all her great grandchildren aside, away from everybody else. And she would give us this one line, whatever it might be, and never explain it. She'd give you the one line, she'd turn around and walk away. And you could say, Grammy, what's that mean? She'd just keep walking. It was up to you to either figure it out or decide what it meant to you.
Mhm.
So one time when I was about 12 years old, she took 15, 18 of us aside and said, if they look that close, slap their face. And I'm a 12-year-old boy saying, what does that mean? I have no
Mhm.
idea what that means. I got a couple of years older and I thought, oh, here's this country girl, reads the Bible every night, just the epitome of that country woman. And I think she was talking to her female grandchildren.
I'm sure she was.
If the boy, you're going to start liking boys, if the boys get too familiar, slap their face.
Mhm.
So that meant nothing to me, but it never left me. And when I got to be a little older than that, maybe 18 years old, I started to think about it again and thought about what it means to me now. If you try something and someone criticizes you, ignore them. Metaphorically, slap their face. Just
Mhm.
ignore them. So here's my advice to your listeners. If you are properly prepared, if you wing it, it's going to be what it's going to be. But if you are properly prepared and do your best to serve others, even if that's in a conference room and you're giving information to coworkers, or your boss, or reports, or whomever it may be, and you're doing your best and someone criticizes you, not critiques you, but truly criticizes you, the heck with them.
Exactly.
That's their problem, not yours. If you wing it, that's your fault.
Mhm. And for the most part, if somebody is there to listen to you speak, they're probably there because they want to hear your message. So you already are a little bit ahead of the game. And what I have found in, the pursuing the speaking career is that audiences really want you to succeed. They want you to. And I remember being at a boot camp one time and I was in the audience and somebody, stepped on the stage. And even before she started to speak, just watching her walk across the stage, I went, oh no, she's going to struggle. And, right there, just walking on the stage, and she did. And it was so painful for us, to watch, because this was a class, and we're all supporting each other and everything. And just to watch her just crumble in front of our eyes was just really painful.
You're absolutely right, Cheryl. And if you think about it, as you say, we all pull for the speaker. Think about the
Mhm,
time when you see someone who's struggling to come up with a word
mhm,
and they're standing there and they're trying to come up with that word. Don't you want to just like lean and pull it out for them? You're really trying to help them. We pull for speakers, even if it's just self-defense.
mhm.
Case in point, think of going to college. I can guarantee you no kid has ever gone into a room for the first day of that class and said, I hope this professor is monotone,
Yeah, right.
boring, so I can spend the next 3 months in a terrible class.
Yeah.
No, you want that professor to be entertaining.
Mhm,
You want them to tell stories so you can grasp what they're trying to convey. We pull for speakers. And again, for those people who just like, for whatever reason, they want you to fail.
mhm.
Again, if they look that close, slap their face.
Right. Well, and I think that then they have a problem. The problem is
They have
theirs,
the
not
problem.
yours.
There's not a darn thing you can do about it.
But
Nor should you.
I do want to segue here just for a moment because my mother, who had 5 daughters, used to say that a lot. If they look that close, they deserve to have their face slapped. Because it would be like,
Cool.
does this match? Is this? And she says, it matches. And, okay, if somebody says that it doesn't, or if they're looking that close, they deserve to have their face slapped. So
Yep.
I grew up on that.
It's great advice. I've used it
really
all
is.
these years.
Well, cheers to your great grandmother.
Thank
I'm
you.
sure she's very proud of you right now.
Oh, she might be. Yeah. And that's all you can do. Just go out and do your best. And when it comes to confidence, prep.
And when you're prepping, do you recommend that people practice or prep in front of a mirror, in front of an audience, like their dogs, the cat, their spouse, their kids, whomever?
Yeah, not in front of a mirror. And the reason not in front of a mirror is you can't concentrate on what you're saying and critique yourself at the same time. So what you'll end up doing is critiquing someone who's not doing well.
Okay.
And you won't know how to fix it. The best thing ever made for a speaker is the phone, the current day phone. Prop it up, hit video, record, and then play it back 3 different times. Audio only, so you can hear how you sound. Do you have fillers? Are you rushing? Are you pausing too long? Not pausing at all? Then on video only, so you can watch your body language. What's it saying? And they call it body language for a reason. It's having a conversation with your listeners, sometimes whether they can see you or not, but also when they can see you, it's having its own messages going back and forth. They better be in line with what you're saying. And then the third time, watch it and listen to it at the same time.
That is fantastic advice. That has got to be the best piece of advice that I have heard. I mean, I have heard, video yourself and then listen to it 7 times, but that is really good. So thank you for that.
Plus, then you get used to listening to your voice. You get over that whole thing. You get used to watching yourself on video. You get over that.
Yeah.
It really makes a difference.
Because that is a little bit of a struggle for people to hear their own voice for the first time. It was like, oh God, or to see yourself on video. It's like, oh no. Yeah.
But that's how people see and hear you. So you really want to know how people see and hear you as opposed to what we think we are. And we're just not who we think we are in those qualities.
So let's talk a little bit more about body language, because that is a subject that I absolutely love, especially as a martial artist and a dancer. The way we step onto the stage or the mat, when we're faced with an opponent, really just the stepping onto the stage makes a huge difference in the way we present ourselves. And of course, as a dancer, or in the martial arts world, or as a speaker, each time that presence is going to be a little bit different. So you have to really know your audience. So if you could address that, I would love it.
People have a very short time when they're speaking and presenting themselves in any way to establish confidence with those watching them. Very short time. Different scientists will say 3 seconds. Some will say 10 or 15 seconds. I always go with 3, because if you can overcome that in 3 seconds, then if it is 15, it's a breeze. But you have a very short time to establish that confidence. And that does, just like you said, when you walk to the stage, how you stand when you face the audience, all those things, if not on the conscious level, definitely on the unconscious level, is affecting how those people feel about you. And if they don't think you have confidence, then they're not sure they have confidence or should have confidence in your message. So you have to establish confidence, and body language does that long before you open your mouth. Even if it's those 3 seconds, that's an eternity in the unconscious mind. So
I talk about posture a lot too. And when people hear posture, they think of the, the military posture, shoulders back, chest up, clench your butt. That just doesn't really work. That's not a relaxed kind of posture that that makes the audience comfortable. So how do you suggest? I mean, I've heard, stand in one place, don't move around. And I think I got that from Toastmasters. And then I went to another, move all over the place. People want to see you move. And it's like, I'm just going to do what works for me and what I'm comfortable with, because if I'm comfortable, then I know the audience is going to be comfortable. So do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, within reason, I agree. But we can be comfortable in a way that truly offsets how other people might feel about us.
Mhm.
So we have to know how that reacts, because it's just like my wife is truly my best friend. We've been married 31 years and we're very seldom apart other than the
Mhm.
workday. Yet I know there are some things that I'm having fun with that are irritating the heck out of her. So it can't just be how we want to be.
Mhm.
So it's within reason. However, you're onto something in that if you're comfortable, it will show.
Mhm.
I don't agree with standing still. We're not
Mhm.
trees.
Mhm.
Should you be a caged tiger moving back and forth across the stage or a room? No. You
Mhm.
have to move with reason, with
Mhm.
purpose, but you should not just continually just stand with your feet planted.
Mhm.
The way I suggest to people real quickly is stand with your feet shoulder width apart and your weight centered.
Mhm.
Okay, you don't want it cocked off on one hip the way a lot of
Mhm.
people stand when they face others. And we do that for a very specific reason when we stand. And people go, it's more comfortable. Physically, no, it's not.
No.
Now, we all do it. We all cock our hip and stand on one leg. But 30 seconds later, what do? We
Mhm.
go to the other hip because that leg gets tired. It's not physically more comfortable, it's mentally more comfortable. And the reason that is because we feel if we stand up straight with our weight centered, that we look too confident. And we don't want to look too confident. So therefore, we're going to look this way, comfortable.
Mhm.
But that's not comfortable to the people who are watching you and who want you to be confident. Think if you had a president or anybody of that power and that stature delivering a speech cocked on one hip.
Mhm.
It just wouldn't happen. Hopefully it never happens. So stand up straight. And you said you're a dancer, so I'm sure you heard this. Don't do the military thing like you said, shoulders back, chest out, chin up, all that stuff. It's too rigid. But you can, as the dance teachers say, think of a string at the top of your head pulling you gently upward. And now your shoulders are over, your head is over your shoulders are over your hips are over your ankles.
Mhm.
That allows you to breathe. It opens up your chest so you can breathe. Breathing is extremely important, not only for
Mhm.
survival, but for
Mhm.
presenting. So think of what the dance teachers say with that string.
Mhm.
Okay. And that makes you open up a little bit. Don't put your hands together because that closes your chest back again.
Mhm.
You don't want that for both the confidence look and the breathing. And what a lot of people do in stance, and you're a martial artist, so think about what happens when someone wants to look small. Their shoulders come rounded, their arms come together, their legs come together. And what a lot of people do, especially women, not picking on women, it's just the way it is, will cross their legs. So their one
Yeah.
leg is crossed over the
Yeah.
other,
Yeah.
which is both protecting themselves and trying
Mhm.
to get small, to be a smaller
Mhm.
target because they're nervous. And
Mhm.
if they feel, even if it's at an unconscious level, the smaller I get,
Mhm.
the less I'm opening myself up to those people who are watching me,
And
which
the
is
easier I
exactly the
can
opposite of what you want to do.
and the easier I can disappear.
Yeah.
There's another component to that posture as well that I see, especially with young girls, and it makes me crazy, but just with that same posture with the leg crossed in front and taking one hand across their body and like hugging the other arm. So
Yes.
it makes them even smaller still. And that is just, yeah.
Yeah.
And that makes them look, yeah, from a martial artist standpoint, it makes them look like an easy target because they're not confident.
Not at all. Not at all. And again, people argue, well, people aren't sitting there. They're pulling for you. They're not sitting there going, I hope she's unconfident and everything else. But after a while, their unconsciousness will say, yeah, I don't know if I believe what she's saying.
Mhm. So the other component of the nonverbal communication too is eye contact.
Eye
And
contact's
so go
key.
for that.
Eye contact. A lot of this comes down to what your mother taught you.
Okay.
Stand up straight, keep your hands out of your pockets, look at people when you speak to them.
Mhm.
Same thing. Look at people when you talk to them.
Mhm.
Eye contact. We want to make eye contact with people. And a lot of people say, well, if I'm talking to 100 people, how can I make eye contact? Well, depending on proximity, you may or may not be able to make direct eye contact with everyone, but you can look in groups. At least it
Mhm,
looks like you're looking at them. But other people will tell them, if you're nervous, just look over everybody.
mhm,
Every conversation is a one-on-one conversation. I don't care if you have 3,000 people in the audience. It's a one-on-one conversation. Think if you and I are sitting at a table having a coffee, and all
mhm.
the time I'm speaking to you, I'm looking over your head. How are you going to feel?
I'm just going to probably smack you across the forehead and say, hello, pay attention to me.
Yeah. Turn around and go, what are you looking at? What's so
Yeah,
interesting
right.
back there? Well, I'm just nervous and I'm afraid to look at you. No, look
Mhm,
people in the eye.
mhm,
I know it takes a little courage, but the thing is, it pays back.
mhm,
When you look people in the eye, you get that encouragement from them.
mhm,
You might get an inquisitive look from them and you can start thinking, oh, do I have to re-explain that or drill down a little bit into
mhm,
that? You get messages from looking people in the eye, good and bad,
mhm,
but you can judge what's going on. You can judge yourself at that point
mhm,
or assess how you're doing. Make eye contact. If you want people to look at you, you have to look at them.
mhm. This is off the subject, but not really. I've even done that in dance performances. And, many, many years ago, I can remember I was doing this one dance performance and I was doing a solo and I could see in the front of the audience and I caught the eye of one of my coworkers and her little girl. And I just caught their eye as I was going by them and, just gave them a smile and the little girl just lit up. She was so excited because, I gave her some kind of attention.
Yeah,
And
one of the
I
dancers looked at
Oh,
me.
yeah. And then I actually did a competition. I won't go into detail, but it was almost 3 years ago. I did a competition and it was in front of 250 people. And it was very intense and very nerve-wracking, but just smiled and looked at the audience the entire time. And after it was over, and my husband said to me, "You looked me right in the eye." And I started to laugh, and it's like, I have no idea where you were. And no, I didn't. But the fact that I was just looking at the audience the entire time, and I did get that as feedback and, for my performance is great eye contact. And there were 250 people and I really couldn't see any of them.
Right. Think of how the audience would feel if all the dancers looked down at their feet while they were dancing.
Yeah, they'd go home.
The teacher
What's the
wouldn't
point?
allow it. The
Right.
instructor wouldn't allow it.
Yeah.
You've got to make eye contact. That's what it's about. Think how people feel like that little girl in the front row. Think of
Mhm.
how people feel, whether it's a well-known speaker that you paid a lot of money to fly to and go see, or your favorite. Think if you're sitting in the third row, you drop $500 to sit in the third row of your favorite musician, and he or she makes eye contact with you during that show.
Yeah.
It's huge, and they know that.
Mhm.
So, yeah, eye contact, it's actually a friend.
Mhm.
It's actually a friend. And most people you make eye contact with, if you're doing well and
Mhm.
you're serving them, you're providing what they want and need to know, they'll nod when you look at them. And that's a
Mhm.
great feeling.
Mhm. So that brings me to another point is your facial expressions. And I have been told that my face is well, I was told never to play poker. Let's just put it to you that way. Because my face really is an open book. Although I can, get the poker face when I'm doing martial arts, but that's a completely different story. But so your facial expressions are really important too.
Just like every other part of your body, your
Mhm.
facial expressions are very important. They,
Mhm.
at an unconscious level, are again speaking to the audience.
Mhm.
We don't know when we're raising our eyebrows, yet we do it constantly all day for all different reasons. But
Mhm.
other people are reading your eyebrows.
Mhm.
They don't even know it, but they are
Mhm.
as we read theirs. A smile,
Mhm.
a inquisitive look, all these different things you can do consciously to go along with the words that you're saying. And now
Mhm.
you have your body, your face, your words all combining to deliver a message. It's when our body and our facial expressions are betraying what we're saying that we have a problem.
Mhm.
And a lot of people say, well, it's only 7% of the words you use. Everything else is nonverbal communication. That was for that whole study. And even the Dr. Morabian who did that study says, yeah, that's not about public speaking. That's
Right.
about sitting with a loved one who says, yeah, I love this gift. And you can tell by their face and the tone of their voice that no, they don't.
Yeah.
A little different thing, but or saying fire. That's actually how they did the experiment, was fire. If I just say fire, like, okay. If I went fire, you know what it means.
Right.
We've got to get out of here. So that's what that was.
Mm-hmm.
But you want all messages, your voice, your body language, and the words you use to be laser focused to deliver a message. When we have 2 or 3 messages going, that's too much for the audience to receive. They zone out, and that's when the phones come out, or the very first things you'll notice of a confused or bored audience, long before the phones come out. Everybody just starts sitting. You hear the one cough, and then you'll start in another spot, and then in another spot. And that's when you've just lost the audience. And the first one to cough or clear their throat set off everybody else. And then the phones come out, or people get up and leave or whatever, but you've lost the audience. And it's not impossible to get them back, but that's reading the audience while you're speaking. And that's why you have to know your presentation so well that you can take time and space in your mind to assess what's going on in the audience and your communication with them. You can't be thinking of both. So you have to know, not memorize. Don't ever memorize your presentation. First of all, you can't, but without a ton of hard work. But know your presentation that well, like you know your favorite song.
I love that you said that. How to read the audience. I mean, that started when we first started about, the cough and how it goes around the room. All I could think of, it was some kind of message or Morse code that they were using that everybody then picks up on. But that was my next question, was how to read the audience. So you must be reading my mind, because you already answered it.
Yeah, don't overdo it. People will give you these so-called tips that are 100% true. They're not. Like a lot of people will say, if you've got people crossing their arms, then they're either defensive, don't believe what you're saying, not engaged or whatever, or they're cold. If I'm presenting from stage and I see a lot of people with their arms crossed, the first thing I think of is it cold in here? And if it is, you'll see a lot of people with their arms crossed. Now, if my answer is no, it's kind of warm in here and everybody has their arms crossed, well, then I have to start dancing, and figure this out. But there are things like that. People nod their heads. Don't be afraid of people doodling. People learn by doodling. I do. If I'm sitting there not doodling, I'm not involved. If I'm making stupid little graphic images on a piece of paper, I'm listening and I'm processing. So the thing is to look at people and get an idea, especially at the very beginning, how they're acting, and then see where it goes from there. If they're leaning in, if they're nodding their heads. And that whole idea of, if I look at you and nod my head, you're going to nod your head. That's true if they're in agreement with you, if they're engaged with you. But I could do that and stand there and nod my head all day long. If you're not engaged, odds are you're not going to nod your head either. So you can do that. You can see if they're looking back at you. And again, today, that's real easy. If they're not looking at their phone, you probably have them.
Well, I was thinking earlier, I did a presentation. This was several years ago. It was after my first book came out. And I was actually doing a presentation to a men's group. It was kind of like a, Kiwanis or something, a Rotary, whatever, and men only, which I thought, well, it's kind of interesting that they want me, but yay, okay, I'll go. And of course, I drove up to Golden, Colorado, which is on the way to the mountains. And
Great town.
Oh, lovely town. The weather was horrible. Blizzard. And I thought, I almost turned around a couple of times to go home, because I thought, but once you commit to something, I learned that even as a little kid. You say you're going to do something, you better show up. So I weathered the storm and I got there. And of course, a lot of the guys didn't come to the meeting because the weather was so bad. And the coordinator said to me, "Where did you come from?" And I'm like, "Southeast Denver." And he was like, "Whoa." So I got their respect right away. But there was one guy in the audience when I was talking, and he just sat there, arms crossed, his head down, eyes kind of closed, I thought. And every time I looked at him, he wasn't looking, wasn't paying attention. It was like, okay, I'm not, resonating with him, and that's just fine. And as soon as I was done, he came up to me and asked for my card. And I thought, okay, I don't know how I reached you, but, or, so you never know. You think you do.
You
And you
think you
don't.
do, but you don't. People learn, process, digest things in all different ways. I
Mhm.
had almost the same story happen to me. And I presented at a corporation. There was one guy never looked at me. And this is around a table of maybe 12 upper management people in a conference room. Pushed his chair back, had his legs straight out. He's leaning back, arms crossed, eyes closed. I thought he was sleeping, tell you the truth.
Mhm.
Never acknowledged me, never said thank you at the end, nothing.
Wow.
And when I spoke to the vice president of that department a few days later to recap everything, he said, Jeremy loves you, loves your ideas. You're the biggest champion for you in this company now. Like, was he sleeping and dreaming of something else? Well, because I didn't think he was paying. He goes, it's just the way he processes stuff.
Mhm. Interesting.
And if you lost a person, but you have everybody else, well, you can't please everybody.
Right.
You can
Right.
try, but you're not going to do it.
Yeah. And you can make yourself crazy in the process as you're trying.
Yeah, and lose everybody else.
Exactly. So how can people get a hold of you? Tell us about your services. Go.
Okay. My services, I generally work in one of two ways with people. It's one-on-one,
Mhm.
whether that's, that varies. It can be on Zoom. If they're local, it can be in person. And there are a few places where I fly out to do one-on-one
Wow.
and travel. So there's that. There's group training. That's
Mhm.
usually corporate, going into a company and working with a group of people. And that can
Mhm.
either be a day or a 2-day stint. And the book,
Mhm.
everything in that book is exactly how I go through my training with my clients. And so if you get the book, you'll see exactly how I do that. You'll get the information from it. And people can find out about all of this in detail at
Mhm.
petergeorgepublicspeaking.com.
Excellent. And tell us about your podcast.
The podcast is a weekly podcast. Actually, it's twice a week. On Mondays, it comes out and I'm interviewing people just like we're doing here. And
Mhm.
there are people who have something to bring to my audience about speaking.
Mhm.
And it's not solely about speaking. It could be how you can promote yourself as a speaker,
Mhm.
whether it's advertising, marketing, social media, whatever. So it's all variations of what people need to speak or have a speaking company. And on Thursdays, it comes out, and that's just me. And I call those quick bites because it's always 5 minutes or less.
Oh,
So I pick a
nice.
topic and say, I'm going through this topic. It might be 2 minutes.
Mhm.
It might be 4 minutes and 59 seconds,
Mhm.
but it's a quick bite.
Mhm. Awesome. Okay. Well, Peter, it has been a pleasure to have you on the show and wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you, Cheryl. It was an extreme pleasure to be here.
And
It really was. I
before,
had fun.
oh, thank you. You sound surprised.
No, not surprised at all, but I did. I had fun.
Good. And before we sign off, do you have any final words of wisdom or little pearls to drop on the audience?
Biggest thing, if someone finds themselves nervous, I said it before, but I really want to drive this home. Just breathe.
Mm.
If you've given birth, taken yoga, you've learned cleansing breaths, diaphragmatic breathing. Use that in as deep as you can go, in through your nose, out through your mouth, as if you're blowing out through a straw. That does two things. It'll calm your nerves, but it also sends more oxygen to your body, which helps be more natural, and to your brain, which helps you think.
Mhm. Excellent. Excellent advice. And the final thing that I would like to say is check your zipper.
Check your zipper.
Okay. Well, thanks again, Peter. I really enjoyed having you on the show.
Thank you, Cheryl.
And everybody, thank you so much for listening. Wow, what a great episode. And Peter's given us some wonderful advice. So just when you find yourself in a position where you are giving a presentation or even just having a difficult conversation, just remember to breathe and check your zipper. And that is the way of the FemiNinja. And that's a wrap on another episode of the FemiNinja Project. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, be safe, be strong, and until next time, bye now.